Good morning and good afternoon to our panelists and to the audience who is joining us today. Welcome to this webinar in which we will be discussing the socioeconomic consequences of the just energy transition with a focus on the closure of coal mines. I'm Alejandra Chavez, Climate and Energy Advocacy Lead at Oxfam Intermon, and for this session, I will be the moderator. On the agenda, we will have a few minutes of introduction to the topic, and then I will invite Marie-Claire, Camila, and Azahara to focus their intervention on two framework questions that we have proposed for this webinar. The first one is focused on the positive and negative aspects to consider when closing coal mines. And then we will close the panel with an intervention from each of the panelists with the recommendations they will have for the closure of these mines according to their experience. I would like to remind everyone that the webinar will be recorded and later uploaded to the project's YouTube channel and website. To participate, please use the Q&A option as all participants are muted. All questions will be addressed at the end during the dedicated Q&A session. I thank the panelists in advance for adhering to the time we have given for each of these questions to ensure that and at the end we will have time for the questions and to answer them. So let's start. Why are we discussing this topic? Just transition is the central theme of the GreenPaths projects, funded by the European Union, which today promotes this webinar. This project aims to enable more coherent and effective policy making to further environmental sustainability and social well-being in Europe and beyond. Just transition is also at the heart of the climate policy debate. In fact, COP28 concluded with the need to move away from the fossil fuel, and this year states must communicate their NDCs. While the transition is urgent, phasing out fossil fuels can generate unintended consequences for communities, such as income reduction, increase inequality, and unemployment. For this reason, we thought it was appropriate to discuss on the socioeconomic consequences of this transition, to learn about the impacts of mine closures on people, and on the other hand, to put on the table recommendations to guide closures. We thought it was interesting to focus on the closure of mines, especially coal mines. This same interest is reflected in the work being developed by Oxfam Intermon by my colleague Jose Maria Zavala, who is assessing the social impact on the communities affected by the closure of mines and thermal power plants of the just transition agreements of the Spanish Ministry of Ecological Transition in El Bierzo, La Siana in León. The target collective of this study is population at risk because of just transition policies, and members of this collective will participate in interviews and focus groups. The main aspects to be analyzed are the context, characterization, and quality levels of the employment generated, the adaptability to new processes, the perception of process compared to other regions and countries of the European Union, the processes of skills training and updating of skills, as well as perspective for the new generations. Another last aspect analyzed in this Oxfam Intermon case study is the availability of resources and infrastructures and the relationship of this phenomenon with the general context of local and regional development of the specific area. During 2026, we will have the results of this analysis, and if you are interested in receiving this paper, you can leave us your contact information in the chat so we can share this paper with you. Let's now give the floor to our guests. I'm joined by Dr. Marie-Claire Brisbois, who is an associate professor of energy policy in the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex and co-director of the Sussex Energy Group. Her research examines questions of power, politics, and influence in energy, water, and climate. She works on projects examining the political implication of decentralizing energy systems, governance of energy demand, security implications of climate change, and energy transitions and social and political responses to decarbonization. She regularly contributes to public debates and energy, including for national governments and at the EU level and in the media. I'm also joining by Dr. Kamila Svobodova, who is an associate professor of applied and landscape ecology at the Czech University of Life Science in Prague, Czech Republic, and honorary research at the Center for Social Responsibility in Mining at the University of Queensland, Australia. Camila is an expert in the social and ecological aspects of mineral extraction with a focus on mine closure and social transition. Her research interests include participatory planning in mining regions, social ecological restoration of post-mining sites, and the social impacts of mineral extraction in the energy transition to renewables. Finally, I'm joining also by Azahara Merino, PhD in environmental sciences, currently works as an environmental technician at the Confederal Secretariat for Environmental Sustainability of Comisiones Obreras, one of the most important trade union organizations in Spain. She has extensive experience as a technician within this trade union organization, including conducted studies, reports, publication, and articles, and monitoring regulations and policies at the national and European level. Additionally, she has experience in representation with national, European, and international bodies. Her research areas focus on just transition, energy, climate change, and circular economy. Thank you, all of you, for joining us on this webinar. Thank you. Now, I will suggest to focus on the first part of this webinar, in which I will invite the panelists to develop your answer in 7 to 10 minutes. I will keep an eye on the time, and I will let you know when 2 minutes left. If questions arise during the presentation, feel free to post them in the chat, and then we will answer them during the Q&A session, as I already said. Marie-Claire, let's start with you. Could you share with us the positive and negative aspects of decarbonization policies, especially on the closure of mines? Please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Alejandra. So I'm going to talk today based on a project that we just wrapped up last year that was another Horizon project called Sintran, which stands for Coal Intensive Regions in Transition. So we were looking specifically at coal mine closure and coal phase out across Europe. And as part of that, we did in-depth studies in a few cases, but we also did a broader analysis of what was happening in coal regions across Europe. And one of the things that we found as part of a broader techno-economic and socioeconomic analysis was that coal regions are not starting, it's not starting from nothing when you start with a transition. So in a lot of these places, they're already lagging behind in existing socioeconomic indicators, so things like education attainment or rates of women in the workforce. And so it makes it more difficult when you're trying to transition, because it means you're not starting from a level playing field, and there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed to support thriving communities and healthy economies moving forward. So one of the things that we found is that coal regions that are at the periphery tend to be more at risk. And it does make sense. So regions that are like in Germany, coal regions in Germany tend to be more central. They have more diversified economies. People move in and out of the region for work. They can commute to other places. And so you have much more diversified economies and social systems that are built up around those. In other places that are more remote, places like We looked at Western Macedonia. We also looked at oil shale phase out in Estonia. But those are places that are a bit more remote, and coal tends to be the only game in town. And so there aren't those existing other industries or economies. Those need to be built up. Another thing that we found is that in coal regions, you very much have family structures and systems that are built up around coal. So coal tends to be quite male dominated, and it lends itself to more traditional family structures because there will be long hours in coal mines, and then often women will stay at home to do childcare and or sort of have jobs that fit with that. And if you're transitioning to a new economy, then there really is we're seeing a lot of out-migration in places that don't have social support. So things like good childcare systems or nursery childcare for people who want to be in work. People are also looking for education opportunities and social opportunities. So all of that it's maybe not the first thing you think about, but it's necessary to transition these places so that people can find other jobs. Yeah, so I mean, there is a high risk of out migration because people will want to move to those places, and that's really part of what we want to try to avoid in coal regions. We want people to be able to feel like they can stay, that they can stay where their families have been, with the social connections and sort of the social capital that they have in place. But another thing, I suppose, the findings from our project were very clear that yes, we need to address sort of existing inequalities that may have compounded over the years across socioeconomic indicators, but that coal miners and their families are really not passive recipients of these policies. These are people who are active. They have plans moving forward. We found in a lot of our case study regions that a lot of the miners, the younger miners who won't retire or retire early as the mine closes, they all have a plan B. So a lot of them are retraining. They're taking night courses to become electricians or plumbers, but are very interested in figuring out what they can do moving forward. And I think the key message that we found is that people really do want to be involved and they want to be engaged. And so one of the, I suppose it's a positive aspect in that people are really, I mean, perhaps logically, but really interested in their futures. And they want to be part of that. And so what we found is that there are really two main ways that people are seeking to be involved. And one of them is they're looking to participate in making decisions about what happens moving forward. And they also want to participate in the economic benefits of whatever happens post-coal. So things like being engaged in local economic development plans, in building new business models, in having a say. One of the things that we heard very, very strongly across the regions was that people are tired of having things done to them. And in Europe, often because it's coal phase out is part of is being required by the EU, and a lot of these decisions are being made at higher levels and passed down to the communities. People very much feel that things are outside of their control, that this is just a decision made by people often in a capital or in Brussels, who don't understand local context, who don't understand what the situation is on the ground, and it's very disempowering, and people are tired of that. They don't want that anymore. And so in a situation when we've got a coal mine closing in a community, there is an opportunity for things to be done differently, for people to have a say in what things will look like moving forward. And this is, there are attempts at this happening in different places. It's quite important that that it's not just lip service, that people are actually listened to. It's not just saying, oh, we'll develop a plan and we'll have a community meeting and we'll have input. But then to get that out of people and then not use it in a meaningful way can be additionally disempowering. But there really is an opportunity to do things differently, and an opportunity to put in place businesses and economic opportunities that are more diversified, that spread out opportunities for wealth generation. So not just putting in another factory or a replacement industry where you have an external owner and often external corporate shareholders, but having more local control, having more wealth redistribution locally. And those are all things that came up in focus groups and interviews and in our analysis. So maybe I'll leave it there. I've got examples of how things have been done in different places, but I'll save those for later on.
Thank you, Marie-Claire. I think you put the attention on these periphery regions, how the mining also structure is part of or has an impact on the structure of families, and also you put or highlight that people really also want to be engaged on decision making, also participate in their economic plan, and also how important is also to engage them, and also as the closure of this mine could also be an opportunity for people on the ground. So thank you. And then I will give the floor to Camila. So Camila, from what you have been observing and studying in Australia and Czech Republic, could you share with us how mines also have an impact on communities' lives? In other words, how the mines end up framing the lives of communities?
Yeah, thank you, Alejandra, and thank you for inviting me and having me. I think I'm going to touch a lot of topics that Marie-Claire already touched as well, starting that the mining communities are not starting from the same level, like Marie-Claire mentioned, like other communities or other rural communities, because mining disrupts places. It's a form of land development that causes major environmental and social and economic disruptions to communities living in connections with these places. So mining comes to the places and that are already, or there have been already shaped by network of social relations, diverse decisions and livelihoods, and places that have been built through the interactions between the communities and the places themselves. The disruptions caused by mining drive communities to reconnect to disrupted places and give them new meanings and symbolic values, because as rooted in attachment theory, place attachment theory, people connect to all places that are a source of meanings and emotions, whether liked or disliked. And if we talk about coal mining regions, coal mining has been there for decades. So there were generations of people that were born in that communities, and they created the bond to the mining landscapes. So from my research in Czech Republic, we found that there were really few people who remember the landscape before the mining started. But all the younger people who were born during the mining landscape, they developed the connection to the pre-mining landscape as well through the stories, through the kin networks that grandmothers, grandfathers were telling them. The dominant mining sector in the region influenced different aspects of community life. So the workplace norms and values usually extend beyond the work setting. So this shared experience of living and working in a mining community creates strong cohesion among residents, and also a unique shared culture that we can see in the mining regions in Germany or Poland or Czech Republic, where they have the mining uniforms and they have songs and they have art galleries and all these things that they are proud of, and they are part of the culture of being a miner. But on the other hand, the presence of mining industry in the region creates increases the existing disparities and create new ones, including there is usually the unfair distribution of risks and costs. And it's, for example, someone's house is closer to the pit, so these families are facing higher environmental impacts like noise and dust pollutions. There are also different distributions of profits from mining. According to gender, it's usually mining is male dominated, also education, and also between mining and non-mining employees. Mining communities have an economic structure which is called lock-in, which is driven by economic dependencies that are formed around a narrow economic base of the mining industry. So the dominance of the mining industry can discourage the development of other local businesses, as the focus is primarily on serving the major mining industry. And the consequence is that the local supply chains become overly dependent on the mining industry, which limits the diversification into other industries. And this is a big challenge during mine closure and planning for post-mining land use. Mining communities often have to face also mining boom and bust cycles when they experience periods of rapid growth and economic prosperity, and they are followed by downturns and economic hardships. Boom periods usually create jobs and attract workers from other regions. And this rising demand for labor often leads to higher wages, boosting the local standard of living, increasing property prices. And mining companies in these boom periods usually invest into infrastructure, such as roads, schools, healthcare facilities to attract the workers and to support the families. But during mine busts, mining companies often reduce their workforce, which leads to increase in unemployment and decrease income for local residents that work in a mine. Local businesses that rely on the mining industry struggle or shut down, and this all is followed by out-migration and a decline of local population. And this uncertainty and kind of the feeling that it's out of their hands in the communities, which is these boom and bust cycles, because they can't really control them, it really creates stress and anxiety for the community members. And the role of the governments in mining communities is also quite specific, that a lot of the governments, especially here in Australia, they rely heavily on taxes and royalties from the mining industry to fund public services. So when mining decrease or even close, the government budgets can face significant shortfalls. Affecting public services. So they're closing schools, hospitals, shops, post offices. It's very common here in Queensland, for example, that they are flying flower ductors in the remote regions where used to be mining. So I would like to just wrap up with just mentioning our research on demographic disruptions caused by the energy transition that was published in late 22 in Nature Communications, that we estimated that a complete phase out of coal could disrupt demographic systems with a minimum of 33 million people. That's a big number, but if we were looking into phasing of energy transition minerals to support renewables, we found that the numbers is 4 times higher, which means like around 115 million people may be impacted if all energy transition mineral projects that are in preparations at this moment would enter production. So if we are trying to plan the just transition from coal, we can't forget about the synergies between starting new mines elsewhere that will eventually have to be closed as well. Yeah, thank you. I think that's it from my side, Alejandra.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Camila. You highlighted some important points related to the experience and also the living ambient of communities living in that coal mining and also mine in general, and also the economic dependency that these communities also have on this, and that we need to consider it, and also trying to find new ways of approach and also try to be more holistic on the way that we approach this kind of impacts, and also the relation between the community life and also the mining execution. And also you point out about the role of governments and how we need also to consider how the income of is impacted by this closure, and the synergies with other kind of industries too, and mining. So thank you so much for this intervention, and I will leave now the floor to Azahara Merino. We are going to focus on Spain. Azahara, your union has been monitoring the implementation of the transition agreements in Spain. So from a social labor perspective, could you very quickly tell us what this transition agreement consists of, and what are the positive and negative aspects you have observed? Azahara, I think your mic is off. I will...
Now?
Now, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Alejandra, and good morning, everyone. I am honored to be here today to discuss a crucial topic, the socioeconomic consequences of transitioning away from coal, how we can ensure a just transition for affected communities. First, I want to express my gratitude to Osman Intermon for inviting Comisiones Obreras to this webinar. I commend the effort in coordinating the GreenPaths project. This initiative is vital in our collective journey toward a sustainable future, especially as we analyze the context, strategies, and policies surrounding the coal phase out. This comprehensive approach is essential for minimizing employment disruption and fostering public acceptance to these changes. Let's begin by acknowledging that transitioning away from coal is not a straightforward process. It presents both positive and negative aspects that must be carefully considered. The coal phase out is essential part of decarbonization and the broader energy transition process. It contributes to global effort in combating climate change and building a sustainable future for generations to come. Also, this transition promotes the development of clean energy sources such as solar and wind. In Spain, the implementation of just transition agreements aims to economically reactivate affected regions. It is important to note here that prior to development of the just transition agreement, there was a previous social dialogue agreement. Our efforts are supported by just transition strategy and legally regulated by the Climate Change and Energy Transition Law. However, we must acknowledge the potential negative consequences of the coal phase out. First, the closure of mine was imposed by European regulation. This closure can lead to economic disruption. Therefore, we must develop alternative industry and affected areas to replace lost economic activity. Also, potential negative social labor impact. This including increased unemployment. So we need to implement comprehensive retraining program and create enterprise zones with capital insensitive to faster high quality job. Also a potential rise in poverty. it's necessary establishing robust social safety nets and targeted economic support for affected family is crucial. The possibility of increased inequality, so it's necessary designing and implementing inclusive economic policies that ensure an equitable distribution of new opportunities is essential. And finally, the risks of social exclusion. We need to create community engagement program and social inclusion initiative to maintain social cohesion. The third aspect is negative impacts on affected territories. This including socioeconomic decline of the area. Is necessary developing comprehensive regional development plans that attract diverse industries and promote sustainable economic growth is vital. Also, potential loss of local economic drivers. We must identify and nurture new economic drivers based on local strength and emerging global trends. The last aspect is challenges in implementing effective transition strategies. It's necessary ensuring coordination between stakeholders, securing adequate funding, and maintaining long-term commitment to the transition process are key. Well, to address the challenge in Spain has implemented a Just Transition Agreement. These are integrated regional action plans designed to support economic activity, diversification, and employment in areas affected by the coal phase-out. The phase of Just Transition Agreement, rapidly. Number one, the limitation of the geographical scope. This consists of identifying the specific area affected by mine closure. Second, signing of the action protocol, establishing a framework of collaboration among key stakeholders. Then, carrying out a diagnosis of the area, assessing the state of vulnerability and identifying challenges and opportunities. Number four, public participation process, gathering proposals and projects from local stakeholders. Then evaluating proposals, accompanying them with line of support, aligning projects with appropriate funding and support mechanisms. And finally, signing of the Just Transition contract with one or several projects. The agreement is signed by Ministry for Ecological Transition and the Demographic Challenge, local councils, company, trade union organization, and other interested or affected entities. For example, university, association, environmental non-governmental organization, etc. Now, I am going to analyze of Just Transition Agreement in Spain. The Just Transition Agreement in Spain have yielded both positive and negative outcome. The positive aspects are number one, reduction of greenhouse gas emission, contributing to Spain's climate goals. Second, social protection measures for older workers. Also, training and retraining support for former mine workers. Significant investment in affected areas. Creation of a new job opportunity. And the last point, implementation of environmental restoration plan. On the other hand, the negative aspects are lack of a comprehensive reindustrialization strategy, also insufficient job creation compared to job lost, mismatch between New York and skill of former worker, time lag between job losses and new job creation, limited effectiveness in population retention, and finally, temporary nature of some new jobs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sara. I think you give a very overview of the transition agreements in Spain, and also you give us some roadmaps access in order to approach them as the limitation of the agreement, action plan protocol, and planning participation, and also you highlight the negative and positive aspects of these agreements and the challenges that it's also supposed for policy making related to labor. So thank you for this, for being on time for this question. All of you were on time, so thank you so much. And we have, as we have seen in this first part, the implementation of mine closure policies and measures, not only in the case of coal mines, are very challenging in terms of inclusion and participation of people living in these territories. So now I will suggest to focus on the recommendations. So for this question, we will have more than 5 minutes because we are very on time. So if you wanted to say more that you were expected, so you can use this time for this. And again, I would like to remind to our participants that you can send to us your questions through the chat. So because then we are going to the Q&A section. So Marie-Claire, what recommendation do you think decision makers should consider when closing coal mines?
Yeah, thanks. I actually, just in framing this, I want to pick up on something that Asahara was saying at the end, which was just focusing on how really disruptive this is for people, and how it's really difficult, and how, yeah, and it links to something else we saw, which is that when people don't have a way forward that they think they can get involved in, then often the only option they have is to resist. And so you see people pushing back. And so really, in order to move forward, and some of the success stories we've seen has been where there's been an opportunity to be involved in what happens forward, so that it's not just pushing back, that's the only option, but it's making what happens next, or being part of what happens next. And on that, I want to talk about something that happened at a very high level, and was successful, but that really has a lot of potential for working at lower levels as well, and that's the German Coal Commission. So the German Coal Commission was a high-level collaborative forum where they brought together people, representatives from different sectors to make a plan for phase out. So they already knew they were phasing out, but they had to set a date, and they had to make, or maybe they already had a date, I can't remember, but they had to make the plan for how to get there. And this is, the process was based on theory on collaborative processes and collaborative governance. And this is theory that's used a lot in other sectors of society. So in situations where decisions have to be made, where there's no easy other way to do it. So there's nobody who can just make a top-down decision and have it be accepted. But really, things are contested, people are upset. You're often stuck with a way to go forward, but you need everybody sort of at least mostly on the same page in order to go forward and to progress. So in this case, that would be in order to have coal phase out progress with the social acceptance that you need, and start moving towards whatever the future is. And so it's been used quite a bit in natural resource governance, in things like forestry or fisheries or water, and it's really quite common, but often there it happens at the local level, and you have representatives or people who have a lot to say, who need to be involved. In the case of of coal transition, it's people like unions, workers, governments, civil society organizations. And then they get together and they talk. And it's important that they meet face to face. They get to know each other. They talk as humans. It's very interpersonal. And so you're developing relationships. You're recognizing that these are also people who are trying to find the best way forward. Everyone's trying to do their best, but you have different interests. And so through that process, the theory is that, and what we've seen in other situations is that people are able to come to some sort of consensus, maybe not what they would ideally like to have happen, but what they could possibly live with. And that's enough. And so in Germany, they tried to do this at a very high level, at a national level, and they were able mostly to reach consensus. There's lots of criticism of the process because people involved in the coal commission process were already representatives of very large constituencies. So big trade unions or big governments. And so there are arguments that lots of voices got lost in that process. And there are lots of lessons that we can learn from that. And there are people who are studying sort of how coal commissions work and how the processes fall out in energy, because they're quite new for the energy sector. We've not really thought about participatory processes in this way. People are starting to, but it is fairly new. And so, but the thing I want to highlight is that there is also potential for that when there are decisions to be made and situations to resolve at a more local level. And so really treating this not as something where people have agency, as something where people have voice, and where you can have a conversation about how things would go. Because one of the things that we don't want to do is increase social tension or social divisions, and we're seeing quite a lot of that in different places now. And so really bringing communities together to collectively talk about how they want to move forward. And again, these processes it's not like there's no conflict, and it's not like everybody is happy, and they're really hard work. They take time, they take people showing up, they take commitment, and it means that whoever is responsible for implementation at the other end has to be committed to either implementing what people decide, or if there's a very good reason why they can't do things exactly. So there might be, I don't know, like an environmental regulation or some sort of rules against state aid in the EU or something, that's very clear for people. So really an authentic commitment to honoring the effort that people have put in. And that's, yeah, I think that's building on the experiences with the German Coal Commission. I have some other examples of other things, but that have worked well, but maybe I can leave it because I think I talked for a while there. Or should I keep going?
You can use 3 minutes more if you want.
Okay. Then I can use a couple of other examples. So 2 places that we looked at that were really interesting were Western Macedonia, which we studied in depth, and the Horna-Nitra region in Slovakia, which we looked at but didn't do big focus groups or anything. And both places we saw really quite proactive communities trying to deal with coal phase out and the consequences of coal phase out. And in Western Macedonia, so this is in Greece, there was really a lot, they had a pioneering mayor, essentially, in one of the big cities, who really supported things like community ownership of new energy projects, the development of cooperatives, so sort of these new business models that help to redistribute economic benefits of energy production, but also in other sectors in agriculture. So there was really a lot of kind of bottom-up movement. There was also a lot of we don't want people telling us what to do anymore. We want to have some control over our own destiny. But in that region, there was really they organized the Forum of Mayors for regions that were dealing with coal phase out. So we're really quite proactive, but really a focus on participation, local voice, and local economic redistribution. In Horna-Nitra in Slovakia, they actually ran this really interesting bottom-up process, participatory process for developing a new local economic development plan. And it wasn't all smooth sailing because there were some issues again with top-down control from the center and sort of trusting people in the region to that they sort of had a vision for that would make sense for what would happen next. But in the end, they did, this plan did get approved, and they do have a very bottom-up local economic development plan that that focuses a lot on entrepreneurship, on small and medium-sized enterprises, on retraining, on sort of all the things that actually Camila and Asahara have been talking about, that can support people as they go through coal mine closures.
Great, thank you so much, Marie-Claire. Thank you for these 3 examples, and also to put on to highlight that these closing processes are quite recent, so there are a lot of challenges also in order to explore it and to know, and communities also are challenging in front of these closure processes. So how you also highlight that it's important to keep in mind that these processes have or needs time, needs concrete agreements, and also that it's important also to include the communities on the participatory plan processes. And you give some also an example on the different aspects that have been highlighted by communities when they are included in this process. So Camila, thank you so much, Marie-Claire, and this let's go to with Camila. You have published a very interesting commentary in Nature Energy on successful social transitions after mining, entitled "Navigating Community Transition Away from Mining." So could you share with us some recommendations that you highlight in that commentary, and others that you have identified throughout your research?
Thank you, Alejandra. Yes, in this article, I was looking into various community transitions. I think I studied 20, and I was trying to find an effective solution from the past that would work in other regions. And yeah, the first thing was that there is no one-size solution that fits all, of course, because the transition needs to be really local. They are driven by local conditions and under different regulatory frameworks. But I identified a 3-steps approach that is centered around stakeholder engagement as the most effective and promising way forward. That was parts of these steps, or the entire steps, were present in all of these successful transitions from the past. And this approach includes, the first step is proactive and early planning. The second step is local-based solutions. And the third one is targeted investments. And now I will talk a little bit about each of the steps. So the early discussion, which I think I reflect very much on Marie-Claire, that the transition needs time, and this is really important, that it needs really early discussion on post-closure futures, because this will maximize the options as it becomes challenging to build trust and relationships in the final years before planned closure. So the earlier the risks and benefits are identified, the greater the potential for succeeding in the transition. And of course, building trust among the mining companies, communities, and governments takes time and persistence. A significant factor, based on my experience, contributing to mistrust between these bodies was the so-called mirage of closure. It was a thing I faced a lot here in Australia when I was working with local stakeholders in mining regions. And the mirage of closure means that there is a promise of closure that is continually postponing due to the factors such as new discoveries or fluctuating prices or advancements in technology. And this lack of certainty regarding the closure dates creates stress within mining communities and local stakeholders. So if the community have previously experienced the mirage of closure, it's really challenging to persuade them to trust and generally engage in the planning process. So the responses from the stakeholders that we heard a lot during our research in North Queensland was that there will be no closure because the companies always find the way how to keep mining or how to recycle, or there will be no closure, so it doesn't make much sense to think about future because there will be another 50 years of mining. So that was really challenging just for us, like let us sort of independent research body to engage in the discussion. So this is the first step, really start early on. And then the second step is locally owned and led transitions. Local governments should be equipped with regulatory power, with skills, with know-how, and mainly resources to lead the transition, because these governments, the local bodies, have the knowledge of local context, and they already established the network of collaboration inside the regions, but also with the neighboring communities and regions. And without such measures, there is a risk that national government that usually are responsible for the transitions initiate some isolated projects that will fail to generate positive spillover effects and that will not last long. So the second is locally owned and led transition. And the third step is targeted investments. Because transition away from mining is costly. And as governments may lack the capacity to bridge the economic voids caused by mine closure, and the mining bonds are usually not as high enough to cover the transition, the regional transition, the financial support from private investors becomes really necessary. So the more successful cases that I studied for this paper, they usually channel the investments towards implementing labor measures, seeding new industries, supporting innovations, enabling repurposing of mining infrastructure, preserving urban centers, and enhancing essential services. I think especially the preserving urban centers it's quite unique, but very much working, because the urban center is a hub of the community. It's the place where the community drives, that they connect to each other. So if the new industries or the new businesses will be connected to the centers or will be residing in the centers, that's kind of natural connection between the community flows and the new development happening in the community or in the region. So as I said, this three-step approach is centered around stakeholder engagement. And I think what's really important, that I can see big development from when I started to work on the social impacts of mining like 10 years ago, and now that there are a lot of effort to engage people. I think it's really good effort, and you can see it in the successful transitions, but convincing the right people from the communities is really difficult, and a lot of projects failed to actually do it. And because the right people are not just going to show up, like if there is an open call for public hearing, because not everyone is confident enough to raise the voice, they don't have resources to participate. So better is like thoughtful inclusion using transparent selection criteria and recommendation by community informants that usually result in selection of stakeholders that are committed to the process, and there will be longer lasting results. And also focusing on individuals by hosting more but smaller gatherings helps to build individual relationships and include marginalized groups, because smaller settings in general tend to make people feel more comfortable expressing their opinions. And also hands-on opportunities like field trips, 3D models, or videos can really serve as an effective technique how to help the community members to better understand the complexity of the transition and the decision-making surrounding the transition. And I think especially now with the age with AI, this is a tool that's really easy to engage with the communities and with the stakeholders. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's everything from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. It's very interesting that you also, again, like put the communities in the center of the planning, but also you mentioned that it's important that they can also see or put their future in the spotlight, in their spotlight, and it's important. And you highlighted 3 steps in order to do that. The first one, the proactive early stage and long-term planning, in order to bring confidence on this kind of processes, the locally owned and led transition and target investment, the third one. And you also mentioned that this process requires engagement and it challenged us also to see the key people and community, the key person that could also be involved in this, and the need of transparent criteria for this. So thank you for your intervention. Let's go to the last intervention from Azahara. We know that that 15 transition agreements have been signed in Spain to accompany the closure of coal mines, as well as thermal and nuclear power plants. So from Comisiones Obreras, what aspects of recommendation would you take out? Your mic, Azahara.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you, Alejandra. Spain's approach to managing the closure of coal mine thermal power plants offer valuable lessons for other regions undergoing similar transition. We have some positive results, including new job opportunity and accelerate emission reduction. However, challenges remain, highlighting the importance of ongoing evaluation and adaptation. We highlight several elements. First, short-term support measures for workers affected by the closure of coal mines should be complemented by a medium-term intervention strategy at promoting the development of new economic activities and job creation in the regions. Number 2, a priority axis of this strategy must be reindustrialization policy based on renewable energies. Taking advantage of renewable energy not only a source of direct employment, but also transform the productive system and leave fossil fuels behind. In Spain, we have a competitive advantage of renewable energy. Sun and wind are abundant and cheap. The third point, integrate set action should also put in place to facilitate the transition processes in areas such as the reinforcement of social protection system, active employment policy, and the strengthening of public service to fix the population. Finally, there must be greater involvement of the social partner and social actor. Also, social dialogue for anticipation should be reinforced, and dialogue with other civil society entities should be reinforced. And the last point, in the next update of the just transition strategy, it should be extended to other economic sectors, for example, mobility. And thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Azahara, for these 3 points that you highlighted. We end this second part of the webinar. So now, if you have any question for our panelists, please let us know by chat, by the chat that you can post your question just in the chat or in the Q&A section that you can find in your screen. And because now I didn't see anyone. So if you, okay, so if we can, okay, we are going to wait some minutes more for one question, but until that, I would like probably to explore a little bit more about concrete examples that you have been analyzed, Marie-Claire, within your working group. So if you can explore and share with us a little bit more about how you plan your research work when you are going to address these coal mines or these mining processes in order to analyze them, which kind of questions you highlight that are important to face and to analyze when you are approaching territories.
Yeah, I mean, there's some questions now, but maybe I'll just say one thing is we were really interested in how people felt the transition was going. So because we were also examining resistance and people pushing back and social support for the transition. And so when we went in, we did focus groups, and it was during the pandemic, so there were lots of complications when we started. But we ended up hiring people who spoke the local language and just talking to local people about who they thought was benefiting from the transition, who they thought was making decisions, what sort of options they had for input, what sort of things they would like to see happen. And it was a really good way to do that, is to just get people together, as Camila says, in small groups so that they were more comfortable talking. And they were moderated, so it was sort of more minority groups could have voice, and if people weren't talking, then you could say, please, what are your ideas? But one of the really interesting things we found from that is that the data on the Just Transition funding from the EU. I think this has now been published by Lola Nack and Jessica Jewell, but basically the distribution of funding shows that most of that money is actually going to things like small and medium-sized enterprises, local entrepreneurship, governments. There is a section that's going to big industry to transition, but it's actually quite small. But the perception on the ground in the focus groups that we did in Germany, in Greece, in Poland, in Estonia, was that people felt, or they thought, that it was just rich people getting richer, or the same elites capturing all the benefits. And so there's a mismatch there. So there's a lack of trust that the transition is going to help people at a local level, and a really big perception that it's going to be unfair, even if the EU is trying to make it not be unfair, which I thought was something really interesting and speaks to probably wider things happening in the world and how and inequality essentially. Yeah. It was super interesting, though.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. And you have the points that you have are quite interesting also in order to approach this key question, and also to be close to these territories. So I don't know, Camila, if you wanted to also share with us your experience on this. It could be interesting also to hear about this.
Yeah, I think the experience is very much what I was talking on the second question, like really exactly what Marie-Claire said, that the smaller groups, the approach through the smaller groups is much more productive, like people speaking the local language. And the best thing is also if the facilitator is local or they know him. actually, it turned out that even it was from my case studies in the Czech Republic, even the facilitator was from the mining company, but was working with that people for a decade. It really helped because the people felt natural, they felt more confident, and it was way more productive than if I would be the facilitator, for example, as an expert. So this is something that's, I think is very important, the language, and that people feel confident in expressing their opinions in terms of like approaching the communities and the engagement. And also, even though I'm very much into very much into like the participatory planning, I don't believe in this like big hearings and the big calls and everyone come into big room, because I don't think that usually the feedback is mainly from people who want to complain loudly, and that's my experience. So this is something like selected really like sensitively, transparently, select the voices, select the voices, the community members, and listen the voices, and be really like productive collaboration. Not just listening the voice, but really engage them in the solution, in the decisions. So I think this is really important.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this. Yeah, thank you, because you point out about the need of create confident spaces, and also both of you mentioned that it's important to speak the local language, and also I think it's important to also keep in mind that participatory processes are the good way to approach this question, but we need also to frame it in a better way in order to answer communities' needs. So thank you for this. We have two questions. The first one is related to the population. So as we know, one of the main risks of mining closure is the population. Population need to be fixed at any cost, or in some cases, it is better to let the population live and redistribute to other places with more economic opportunities. This is one question. I don't know, probably Camila or Marie-Claire, you can give some answer of this, also Asahara, but I think probably Camila and Marie-Claire can give a word about it. And the second question is related to the German, but it would be good to ask, especially the German, related to the German example. So how does, but it would be good to ask, especially to German representative, how does she see the difference in power relation at the local level? This is a question for Marie-Claire, because you mentioned the German example, because you said that all people come together to discuss their projects as if there are not inequalities of power and no local elites probably pushing and being more present to influence decisions. So let's answer these questions.
Shall I take the second one, or Camilla, shall you do the first one?
Yeah, I can do the first one maybe, if it's fine, and then yeah. So it's actually really good questions. I'm asking myself a lot, especially working with remote communities, because the life there is hard and it's expensive, right? So how much, and this is a big problem in general, is fly in, fly out employees. It's a huge issue here in Australia, and that's something that the companies, they are refusing to build a town like it used to be. So there is actually no more community. So I'm sure that there will be new mines in remote areas, and there will be no new communities, because it's cheaper for the company to bring fly in, fly out. And then there will be less and less these mining communities in remote areas that I think naturally they will not be there, because the governments will probably at some points refuse to pay the voids for their lives. And that's I think, yeah, that's the reality, that it's really expensive in the remote areas. And then we have to ask, like, okay, how for hundreds of people living there, how much it's worth it, even though of course everyone counts.
Can I just add, I think this is a very different question in places that are more densely populated like Europe than it is in places like Australia or Canada, where I'm from. And that's because Australia and Canada, often you might have a newer community built up around a place. And there's a whole set of literature on boom and bust economies and boom and bust communities, boom towns, they call them in Canada, where there would be a big mining boom for something and it would get mined out or get closed down and everybody would leave. And in that case, the town would just disappear. In Europe, though, often before coal mining happened, there was already people there and there was already an economy in place. And it's not just that there wasn't, it was a natural area with no regular human habitation. So it is a very different question, but I also ask myself a lot this question of how much will people stay and is there some sort of natural flow, even though it's quite sad to lose a community, and what's best. I don't think there are any easy answers for that. But I do think it's a conversation and sort of giving people reasons to stay or allowing people the opportunities to create reasons to stay is important. But I'll just respond to the second question about how power imbalances at the local level, which is, I wrote my PhD exactly on this, on power in collaborative governance processes. So you're right, there is always power at every level, and there's lots of guidance on how to run these processes. To try to address some of those power imbalances you can never address because they're very structural. So there are differences in education levels, there are differences in who even has time to show up to a meeting. So is somebody working 3 jobs to survive? Can they not get childcare? Are they a single parent? Do they have, so all these things that are really subtle and structural can be really hard to address. There are ways you can make it better, though. So there's lots of guidance on how to design good processes. Having a really good facilitator who is attuned to those sorts of power imbalances is essential. So somebody who can pull out those voices, but also designing them to help bring people up to speed. So if you have someone there who knows, who like went away and did a degree in economics and is really confident and talks a lot, then you need you can have a moderator help sort of limit that input and hear other voices, but you can also try to bring other people up to speed. So you can have training sessions, you can provide opportunities for people who you want to participate to identify topics that they don't feel comfortable talking about. You can provide funding, you can provide childcare, you can compensate people for their time, and you can keep track of who you're missing, and try to solicit voices. It's never like dealing with power. It's never perfect. You can only ever try to do your best, but there are mechanisms and ways that you can design things to try to minimize that.
Great. Thank you all of you for these answers. So we don't have more questions, so I think I'm going to suggest to close the webinar, but not before saying to thank all of you and also the attention and the interest on this webinar. So thank you for participating. I think we highlighted that this is a very challenging aspect of the closure of mines, and we highlighted it on different perspectives, the social labor perspective, but also we mentioned the planning perspective, at the different also levels, at the territorial, but also at the national and policy making level too. And also we highlighted the importance to be close to these territories and to adapt our framework of work to this. That is a key element to be successful also for this closure of mines. And so thank you, Azahara, Camila, and Marie-Claire for participating in this webinar, and to all the participants and the audience for their interest in this subject. I also would like to remind you that the next webinar will take place on March 5th under the title How the Lithium Rush is Producing Sacrifice Zones in Europe and Beyond. You can already register and find all the necessary information on the GreenPaths project website. So thank you so much, and thank you to our panelists, and have a good day and evening for Camila.
Thank you,
Thank you.
thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you very much.